Ladies and gentlemen, have your attention please. Take a seat if you can. Just a couple of parish notices before we start. First of all, thank you to all who attended the the summer party rather. Good time had by all, despite the train strikes. Coming up, 1st to the 7th of August, we have London Hat Week. 7th of August, there is the London Hat Walk. Details on our Webular site. The next meeting is 3rd of August, where Tim Eyre will talk about the Aztecs. There might be a human sacrifice, who knows?
It's not the same with that one, is it?
No, indeed. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker, David Saxby, who will talk on prison, how to enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Evening, everybody. Nice to see your old friends here. I haven't seen you for quite a while. Yeah, prison. Everything you wanted to know, but we're afraid to ask. Can I just check before I start? Who here has got a conviction coming up? Who here has also been in prison? Yeah, don't have to raise your hands. Just give me the secret sign that we all know.
I've been to prison, but I broke people there.
I think it's. Seems to be about half. Anyway. Right now, I'm going to ramble on for quite a lot. I don't do notes and that sort of thing. I just sort of ramble on. But if there's anything you want to ask, you know, I mean, if there's anything you want to ask now, and I'll try and sort of fit it in later. Is there anything you've always wondered about through prison? Anybody want to ask me anything just now? No?
How do you remain cheerful?
There's something wrong with me because I understand that people get depression. And it's a serious thing. I know people that sort of suffer. It's a pretty bad thing. But I think I've got the opposite. I've never. I'd like to try being miserable, but I've never managed. I can't help but be cheerful. I'm 73 and I've just been sort of optimistic and cheerful my whole life. I don't know why, because I know some people just get cheesed off about things and miserable. I don't. I'm always sort of like this. So prison is what you make of it, and yeah, some people. Just saw a couple of deaths while I was there. Now, there's a phrase. First, I was convicted for cheating the revenue. Now that can mean absolutely anything at all. And it's such a wide sort of compass. It can mean anybody who's just a bit behind on their tax, like I was. I was convicted of cheating the revenue of £500,000. Now, I'm pretty much a one-man band. I had a very small factory, just 6 people working. I did factory tailoring. It's impossible to make money doing factory tailoring. That's why I was pretty much the only one doing it. But I liked it, and I liked to keep it going. Like most people doing factory tailoring, I went bust a couple of times, and managed to hang on to your machines and get it started again. So I got it started and just keep going, because we like doing it. I might have been able to do something that made more money, but it's fun. In fact, my business tailoring, it's a very social business. You can talk to your customers. It's just nice. You get to meet some pretty interesting people too. I was in Fulham, the centre of the civilised world, and I'm not going to mention any of my clients really, but it's impossible to watch telly for more than 20 minutes without seeing a few of the people that I make stuff for. I made a lot of stuff for film and theatre, all great fun. Anyway, they hauled me in. And I had an interview, and they told me they'd done a forensic examination of my bank accounts, and that I owed them about £500,000. Now my turnover was about 350,000, something like that. I kept downsizing to try and keep my head above water. And they said they'd done a forensic examination of my dad. They said I was paying £25,000 a year in rent. I was paying £85,000 a year in rent. They said I owed £30,000 a year in corporation tax. That was absolutely impossible. I either broke even. Breaking even was brilliant. If you can break even, that's fine. You keep going, put some bottle of wine on the table, that's great. Most of the time I made a little loss. But the people that prosecute tax, they have it in their brain that everybody is the enemy. So even if they found out that somebody they were prosecuting doesn't really owe any money, they will still continue and construct a case against them. A bit like, you know, these poor guys that get accused of rape or something, the police have got sort of evidence, text and things which prove the guy's innocent, but the machine keeps rolling and yeah, that happens. Tax people are even worse than that. So the telephone, hundreds of them were suddenly charged with fraud. Yeah. Now, you have to realise that this whole sort of crime thing is an industry, and that people in it just want an easy life. And statistically, it's impossible that you have a jump from just 1 or 2 postmasters every couple of years getting done for nicking a bit out of the till, and then suddenly 300 next year. It's impossible. Not a single judge, not a single Crown prosecution person, not a single person said, hey, there's something funny about this. No, they'd all got a job and they proceeded with those jobs. And the people in the local papers where these people live, they say, oh, you got caught, you know, because they didn't believe it. They think, he went through court, he was found guilty. Can't afford a decent lawyer, so you get legal aid. Now you can only get legal aid if they forensically examine you and they find out you've got no money. And I got legal aid. So I have one bunch of government people telling me I've got no money, I can have legal aid, and another bunch telling me I've got millions of pounds stashed away and I should have paid some tax on it. Criminal lawyers, they're criminal lawyers, they get you and you're just merchandise, really. And you think they're working for you. You think your legal aid guys are working for you. They're not, they're working for themselves. They tell you to plead guilty because you haven't got much chance of getting off, this kind of thing. It's like the guy that has a fight in a pub but wins and maybe breaks somebody's nose, gets charged. They say, well, you might get charged with assault and you might as well plead guilty, then you won't get a long sentence. I was told that I'd have to plead guilty because I'm behind with the tax, can't deny it, never been in front of the tax. So I said, okay, and they said, well, that's the only chance you'll have of getting a suspended sentence. So the thing went forward. I didn't get a suspended sentence, but a 2.5 year sentence, based on the figure. See, it's based on the length of time you've been offending and the amount of money that you've stolen or cheated the remedy from. Now, the amount of money that I owed was just impossible for a business my size to owe that much tax. I mean, Starbucks don't pay that much tax. You know, nobody with my turnover could possibly owe that much tax. My VAT was actually in credit. Think about that. While they were constructing a case against me, I had a reserve fund for employees' tax, which you have to pay, regardless of whether you're making profit or not. They made me pretty much at gunpoint take that out and put it into my VAT account, putting my VAT account in profit, which nobody has a VAT account in profit. And all the time, they were telling the judge at my trial that I hadn't registered, I had a VAT number, and that I was unknown to them, that they didn't know about my business. And it wasn't until one of my employees complained about his tax reference or something that they found out that I was operating a criminal enterprise. And the judge didn't say at any point, see, the judge is supposed to say in all these trials, that figure, £500,000, has that been checked by an independent accountant, or have you just made it up? Now, a judge is supposed to say that. My judge didn't say that. My judge, who was described by one of my lawyers as an interfering judge, or something you call him. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, oh, he interferes and he sort of asks silly questions. An interventionist judge, that's the word he used. So, all right. And sure enough, halfway through the prosecution's barrister's sort of statements, he said, well, he must have known he should have registered. Obviously, he was completely unaware that I'd had almost daily visits from these bloody people. They visited my factory once with bailiffs and I had to pay them 13 grand. So I was not only was I well known, I was very well known to them, but in court, the judge thought that I was unknown and I hadn't registered. Anyway, prison. One of the reasons prison doesn't really work very well is because within minutes, anybody arriving in prison with the idea, well, I've been an idiot, I've got a court now, better change my ways now, you know, I look after my family properly. I mean, within minutes, that's knocked out of you. Because you come up, the phrase you hear a hell of a lot in prison is, and they call us criminals. Now, there's another thing. An awful lot of really despicable, horrible people don't get a prison sentence because some legal loophole or whatever and some brilliant barristers. That happens with maybe 10% of trials. And there's the other side. There's an awful lot of innocent people who haven't done anything wrong. It's about 8%. Everybody seems to agree it's about 8% that are in prison. They shouldn't be in there as well. In prison, they're called, somebody referred to me, so it's not straight guys like Dave. You know, it's something like, don't apply to straight guys, you know, meaning people like me. But you don't say that. When you're in prison, nobody asks what you've done. Nobody says to you, what you in for then, mate. If somebody feels like telling you, then they will, but generally they don't ask. But you get there, and you're immediately confronted with, well, the prison staff. Some of them are sort of okay. But later on, you see those same guys throw okay, leaving with all the toilet rolls in the back of their car, licking stuff in the prison. The food's terrible, and you will die if you just survived on that alone. Now, before I went to prison, I didn't really know much about criminals. I had no idea before I went to prison where I could buy a gun or how to get somebody killed. But now I do. Yeah, I could now go and buy a gun. They teach you things in prison. There's an awful lot of scams in prison with the education thing. Apparently, I told a lot of lies. I said I've got Jubitron's contracture and I can't turn the screwdrivers to get out of it. Yeah, but we've got to give you this. They have to give you that because they get money for each one that they give out. I did a 2-week course of plumbing. Right, for that they'll get a few hundred quid. The most popular course in the prison, I was at an open prison after a very short time because in the state. The most popular, because there's bricklaying, there's about half a dozen people on that, and there's carpentry, and there's computer skills, a lot of people on that, about 15 people on that. The most popular was horticulture. Yeah, loads of young guys wanted to learn how to grow stuff. I mean, so the agricultural industry is obviously going to benefit from their skills. Now, like it's about half a dozen people in the bricklaying. I'd say there's maybe 70 in the gardening, and mainly young guys too. So all credits. You leave prison with 46 quid. Now, let's say you're a young guy. Just being prosecuted for, I don't know, having a bit of drugs or something like that, or a fight or whatever, and you get a prison sentence. You were working, so you've lost your job. Your car's going to be repossessed. Your girlfriend's probably going to leave you. And then you get out of prison with a prison record. So it's really difficult to get a job with a prison record. Even if they don't know about the record, you have to construct something about what you've been doing for the last 2 years or year or whatever. And you got 46 quid. Now I met a friend of mine, he came up to Sheffield to see me, and how's it going? I said, can't tell you, mate, can't tell you. I said, understood. He said, had no choice. He went back to drug dealing because he left prison with 40 quid. He said, no choice, I didn't have anywhere to live. The only people I know that could front me some stuff, and said, he's not doing it now. He's now got some scaffold business, get his foot on the ladder again without going back into crime. Now, I did the first week at a proper CCAT prison. Now, if you've seen Porridge, and you think it's like that, it's not like that. You just hear screaming on nights, and there's a lot of violence. The conditions are pretty terrible. the cell is about, say, that big, like that, about that room, and there's bunks. All the furniture, all the beds are in really poor, dirty sort of condition, and that's where you eat. Oh, and it's also the toilet, and you'll probably be in there for 22 hours a day. There's an exercise thing, you can walk around for 40 minutes. So you eat all your meals in what is in fact a shared toilet. That's Seacat prisons. Now because of a mistake, I got moved very quickly. It normally would have been a couple of months. I got moved very quickly to an open prison. Now that's pretty much, if it wasn't for the fact that my wife had also got a prison sentence, although she had nothing to do with my business at all. If it wasn't for that fact, I could have actually enjoyed it. It was almost like going to a monastery for retreat or something for a little while. I even thought about going back weekends, you know. But an open prison, then you can sort of take liberties. Like I said, the food is pretty terrible. So I was in a wing for the last 6 months, which was pretty much reserved for murderers. So all my friends were murderers or pretty serious criminals, armed robbers, that sort of thing. But our wing was only for people over 60. And you had no security, the doors were open all the time. You have a key to your cell and you could go in and out. And unlike anybody else in the prison, we could go in and out at 3 o'clock in the morning. We weren't supposed to, but we could. So we used to go and burgle the greenhouses. There was cherry tomatoes, mushrooms, and good nutritious food there. But they wouldn't let the prisoners have it. You could only eat what the prison gives you, and you would die. You know. So we used to make, we used to eat dandelion leaves, and we used to make nettle tea, and anything. A popular book in the library was this sort of scavenging books where telling you all the things you can eat. So we did that. We managed to eat, and you have canteen money that you're given about 13 quid as long as you work, or if you're retired, you get this 13 quid, and you spend all that on tea, and you're given milk, given a little box of milk about that big, which is just about enough for a small bowl of cornflakes, but not enough for any tea later on. So you have to do deals to get tea from like vegans or people that have got access to tea in the stores, and you try to keep half a dozen of these little milk things, so you've always got, because I need tea. I mean, I have tea on a drip in my arm at night. I've got to have tea every 5 minutes. Does anybody want to know anything about prison? Anything else? Anybody?
I do. Can I just say that a lot of what you say is, some of it's true, some of it's not really elaborating what you really said, because at the end of the day, I was in Borstal too, and I used to buy, I have to sell and buy. I just bought pounds for 16 bob a pound.
Yeah.
So they give me a pound, I give them 16 bob for it. Very, very wealthy. And that's because I was what they call a tobacco baron. And also I used to sell cigarettes and also to do money. You must know this. And I made a big living. I had guys out there working for me. I was in Gaines Hall for a year. And when I walked out there, I might come out with absolute fortunes of money. And but would you say this? Let me ask you this. The best thing that happened to me was that being in prison for that year was the best, because I walked out saying, I will never, ever, ever put my liberty in jeopardy again.
I spoke to a guy who'd been convicted of defrauding some school of £100,000 to have a sex dungeon in his headmaster's study. You can look this guy up, because you remember his name, he's called James Stewart, and it was in all the papers. He partitioned off his headmaster's office and made a sex dungeon on the, there's some good pictures. But no, in prison, there's no smoking now. There's no, so you can't have tobacco brands anymore.
When were you in prison?
3 years ago.
Ah, yeah, when I was in prison in the 60s.
Yeah.
When prison was prison.
A lot changed.
What you had was an easy way. What I had was penal servitude. Hang a second, before you carry on, when you talk about like 3 years ago, okay, I was in the prison in the 60s. When I was in prison, it was like a tough deal. Like you had to stand there and beat the fuck out of people because nobody would take a notice of you unless you knew what you were doing. When you were a tough guy, you, and like had to be, I had to stand and beat the fuck out of people to say, look, you cannot do that to me, and I had to protect the people who couldn't look
See,
after themselves.
I had the advantage of being over 60, and most of the people in an open prison that are over 60 are lifers finishing off their term. But there's no money in a prison. You can't have. There's no cash. You can't.
When I was in the scrubs, see these glasses? These glasses, I used to have gold rimmed glasses.
Yeah.
And when I went to prison, I did have gold rim. The lifers came up and said, I want to marry my boyfriend, right, in prison, in scrubs. Can I buy your glasses? I want to make a wedding ring out of them. And so I said to them, how much you give me? I said, I'll give you 4 ounces of tobacco for your glasses. So I went, absolutely right. And that set me up. So when I went, so I sold my glasses, I couldn't see nothing for about 3 months. You know, but, I rang my mum and dad, I lost my glasses. She said, I'll get some on National Reserve. So I had these horrible glasses, turned out after about 3 months later. So I had these horrible glasses. So all of a sudden, when I went to Gaines Hall, I was sitting on lots of money. You, right, as a businessman, didn't know how to work the system.
No, fortunately, I'm a tailor. And,
yeah, but I was a tailor too.
Yeah,
for threepence, for 3p, I used to press their trousers. I used to press their trousers.
The handy thing about having a few tailoring skills is that you sew buttons on, etc. And I became quite popular in that. But yeah, there's no money, so there's no tobacco barons anymore because you're not allowed money. You get canteen money, but that's a credit. And you can buy stuff with it.
Yeah, my question to you is, very illuminating, interesting talk. My question to you is, what, did you appeal?
Appeals. Now, people say, oh, you're not guilty, why didn't you appeal?
Yeah.
Okay, you've been given a 2.5-year sentence.
Yeah,
that means you're going to serve about 11 months, and then you'll be released on a tag. An appeal is going to take nine months before it's even heard, and your appeal time doesn't get discounted. So if you appeal, you'll actually spend longer in prison. You find that out pretty quickly.
Okay. Can I ask a supplementary question? I've got to mention, I work in compliance, so did you have an accountant?
Yes.
Who was your accountant working with all the time?
Yeah, I had an accountant.
Yes. Okay. So what information were you getting from him on a regular basis?
So what?
What information were you getting from him that you could give to your barrister, whoever was your who could support your defence?
My accountant managed to lose. There's a long story behind this. Managed to lose a lot of my records that he was holding. I was just about to sue the people that handled my bankruptcy because I finished up paying double business rates, and obviously had a perfectly good case. I had all the correspondence. My accountant, who I later found out was related to the receivers, managed to lose all the evidence. So my accountant wasn't great. That's accountant.
Can I just make a point here? The barristers, when I was banged up, they turned up at the back, and I never met them. And there I was a teenager. I was sitting there looking at, God knows, I've done these horrendous crimes, and I eventually got arrested. And they said to me, you are a nasty piece of work, Mikey Babes. You know, I said, well, it's a fuck, what do you think? And the barrister came down and said, no, he stood there and said, well, you know, Mr. Reynolds, we really don't think he should be prosecuted for his driving. That was it. So they banged me up for 2 years. It was 6 to 2, that's bullshit, 6 to 2.
In prison, there's a sort of hierarchy, and awful lot of people like play with best mates with Brinks. I mean, they are the most famous of the Brinks Map people, and conversation very quickly. Oh yeah, I was with him. I was his cellmate, and I know Noy and all this sort of thing. And I always say, well, it's funny you should say that because Mike Relton was my lawyer when I had a photographic business, just coincidentally. And so, well, Mike Relton was the guy that handled the bullion for Noy.
Yeah,
and so that's going through. But I was with all the murderers, you see, in my wing. So all the young guys there assumed that I would be a murderer. So I didn't really get any trouble from anybody. I had a bit of problem with one of the murderers one time. He was sort of shouting the odds and this sort of thing. And you have to pretty much stand your ground. You're pretty safe in an open prison because if anybody did thump you, they would go back to closed conditions, and they're wasted. It's very serious to for bullying or anything like that. Yeah.
Like lifers, like murderers, come at the end of their sentences when they go to another prison.
Yeah.
Okay, so I find it difficult to believe that anybody would take an issue with you unless they're completely stupid to go back and lose remission.
This guy was particularly stupid.
Yeah.
He had 30. He was boasting to me that he had 54 convictions for assaulting the police.
Right. Okay.
And he'd occasionally say, parole or no parole, he'll get a slap. But you have to stand your ground. You can't have somebody shouting at you.
Yeah, but when you said we were talking to lifers, you know, and you're in open prison, these guys have done like 20 years, and they're at the end of it, and so they ain't going to do nothing. They're like limp. Then they just want to get out. Like my. No, it's not what he said. What he said was, well, like I was talking about something completely different. The difference is, like, if you know anything about being in prison, or you know anything about like what it's like to be in prison, like to be at the sharp end, and none of you really do. The difference is, like, when you go to prison, they take everything away from you. They take your dignity, they take your life, they take everything from you, and that's what it was. Nowadays, it's like give you a PlayStation, give you a TV.
Yeah, they got PlayStations now. Yeah.
Right. I didn't get any of that. What I got was a slap and a smack and a fucking punch in the gob. That's what I got, and I deserved it because I was a gobbie like I am now. Like now, the reality is, it made me a better man, and the system worked for me because I came out and made myself a millionaire.
Well, like I was saying about this guy, James Stewart, I spoke to him and I said, you know, how do you do it in prison? He said, well, I don't like it, but I wouldn't like to be robbed of the experience.
Well,
they tried,
just
to continue, I don't probably haven't got much longer. They tried to deport me. Now, the reason that they brought the case against me in the first place is because I might have humiliated them. I'm sitting in my shop in Fulham, and I get a call from somebody and said, are you David Saxby? I said, yes. Are you trading as David Saxby? I said, yeah. Can I help you? He said, well, you can't do that. I said, who are you? And he said, it's some bloke from Department of Industry and Skills. He said, you traded as David Saxby Limited. You can't use that name now because you went bankrupt. I said, yeah, I can. I'm David Saxby. I can. It's my name. He said, no, not allowed to use it. And I said, just piss off. Stop bothering me. A couple of weeks later, I got exactly the same call from the same song sheet, from the same guy. Are you David Saxby? No, you're not allowed to use that. You'd only be allowed to use that if you had a previous record of you using that name before. I said, I'm 65, and I've been trading on my own name my whole life. Now, piss off and stop bothering me. A few months later, I got a letter under the door. There was a warrant out for my arrest. I phoned Hammersmith Police Station. Yeah, we'll come down and we'll look at that. He said, oh yeah, don't worry about it. They just want you in court. I said, what's wrong about it? He said, well, you probably were notified, didn't get announced. So I'm in court a week later. I didn't get arrested, just had turned up in court. And there you, David Saxby. Yeah. I know you've been trading. Well, do you have a lawyer with you? I said, no, but I'm perfectly entitled to do that because it's my name. He said, well, there's some debate about that and you should have a lawyer with you because you might get a custodial sentence. All right. So I applied for legal aid, got legal aid. It took a year. Finally came to court. They had a wad of documents that thick. They had photographs of this shop. They had photographs of my customers, which is a bit weird. And I turned up for the hearing with my lawyer. This is David Saxby. Yeah. And my lawyer just handed them a bit of paper, some historic thing with David Saxby on it. And the magistrate goes, oh, you can go now, Mr. Saxby. I said, hold on. Can we have a trial? Because this is all a bit silly. Turned up here and nothing said. So no, you can go, it's fine. So I was released. They were fuming. And my lawyer said, you might watch out, they might want some revenge. And sure enough, I got the whole thing thrown at me. I didn't know any tax. I've got a document in my bag there, I won't bother to get it out now. It describes me in court as leading a criminal lifestyle. Yeah. always work 7 days a week, because I like it. And it also describes me, and it describes my children too, as nationality unknown, because they're trying to deport my wife. Now, this is on a Home Office document. Now, that's the same, you know, the Home Office that issues passports. But what happens when a machine starts rolling with these things? It goes to somebody else's desk, and they all add a little bit to it to make it a bit more like they're going to win. They all, these little touches, oh, nobody noticed that, we'll just put that in. They put, in trying to deport my wife, they said there's no evidence of her living. See, one of the things, if you've lived continuously in the country, you can't be deported. They said there's no evidence that you've lived continuously in the country for more than 5 years. And she wasn't allowed to say, because you're not allowed to say anything when you pleaded guilty. You can't say that's not right. You're not allowed to say anything. I wasn't, the judge told me to shut up when I tried to say something. We've been prosecuted for 8 years of cheating the revenue. But they said there's no evidence that you've lived in the country. So one of them has to be. But this is how it works. It's just a business. Everybody in it, the people, they don't go after actual tax cheats, or when they do, they get bribed and then they leave them alone. I know this because I know the people that bribed them. A car dealer who was in prison with me, he said, didn't you just bung them? I said, no, I don't think I'm going to try that. He said, I had a VAT and I used to give him a new car every year. It never bothered me. He said, I never registered for years. Just give him a new car every year. Yeah. But yeah, so they told lie after lie after lie to convict me. And when you get to prison, you see all these sort of scams, the education scams. You see there's tales of people that handle prisoners' goods, wardens, stealing from them. But I think last year it was 300 prison wardens that got sacked for dealing in drugs. All the drugs come in through prison wardens. And some of them were at school with the guys that were in prison. So that's the phrase you hear all the time in prison. And they call us criminals. And that's why people that go to prison, with the idea of get my life back together, I'm going to go straight or something, they realise it's hopeless. Because authority, is worse than us. So I'm going to wind it up there. Let's get more questions.
Just, if I may, just a quick question. You mentioned open prison.
Yeah.
I don't actually know what that is. The way you described it, I kind of imagine a perfectly ordinary prison, except the doors aren't locked. It's either that in my head, or it's like a country house that the Ministry of Defence took over in the war and they kept lads in. Is it something between the two? Or?
Funnily enough, that last one, I think it was some sort of military defence place at Hollesley Bay. On Sundays, you can, there's football. I have no interest in that, but you can go and watch it, and you can sort of walk around, and you can see the sea. Do you know, a big event, this, on the walk round that you do after dinner, there's this ferry goes past, and everyone used to watch this ferry going past. It was like a big thing. I mean, they didn't like me, the warders didn't like me very much. I mean, sometimes you meet people and you sort of want to say, well, shall I talk down to you or will you talk up to me? And, you know, they didn't really like me. I never got into the habit of calling anybody sir, so I certainly wasn't going to do it. But a lot of the lifer guys, I wore pretty much what I'm wearing now. You're not allowed jackets and ties, but I'd wear a shirt. And sometimes I'd get in a conversation with somebody who was wandering around. And one guy thought I was his superior. He thought I was with the education. And when I said, no, so I thought, yeah. But not many people wear trousers, everybody wears tracksuits and that sort of stuff.
You can wear trousers if you want.
Sorry, so can we ask you, when you were in Hollesley Bay?
It's 4 years ago.
4 years ago?
Yeah, for a year.
1960, 67, 68, up to 71, it was a ball school.
Yeah.
Right, my friend was in there, Jimmy Harris, right? And their main task was reclamation in the wash of ground. And they used to lump up big barrows of tuck it down there, and that was what you did. And also, the thing is, when you go to ball school, you have ties. You've got blue tie, green tie, red tie, and a brown tie. Okay, that just says where you are in the life. Okay, what you're describing in Hollesley Bay isn't prison. You're describing a holiday camp. Hollesley Bay in the 60s was a fucking holiday
Yeah.
right? It's where when you went there, you didn't just go like, oh, you got slapped around and beaten up. When I was in Bristol, you didn't stand there. I got fucking nicked for stealing a tomato. I got nicked for kicking a cabbage. I got GBH on a cabbage. Right? I lost 3 days remission for that. That is prison, and that's what's missing out what we've got right now. What you've got now is a bunch of mamby-panging motherfuckers who don't understand what it is like to be in prison. I was in prison, and I went to prison for lots of things. I was a nasty piece of shit. When I was a young kid, I used to go and shoot people and fucking do things that people don't think about. That's what I did, right? And I got nicked for it. They didn't nick for all of it. What I did was what I did. But what I would say is, when I went to prison, it taught me a lesson. What you don't get in prison right now is a lesson. All you get is a place to go and say, well, you know, I'm a Muslim, I can do this, I can do what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Hang a second, in Maidstone prison right now, hang a second, there is not one white face in Maidstone prison. They're all Muslims, right?
Yeah.
And none of the prison officers will touch you.
Yeah.
And why won't they touch you? Because it's a racist, you cannot do that. And so what's going on in prison right now, they're not teaching, they're just locking people away. They're not giving them a lesson, not like what I got, that taught me a lesson and made me a rich man. And taught me, I said, I don't want to do this ever again. I don't want to do that.
And that's why we don't get bacon for breakfast.
Yes, you do. Oh, yes, you do.
No, we don't. No, not
Yes, you do.
The majority.
You only get porridge. You only get porridge, right?
Yeah, the majority were Muslim, and it's creeping up.
Only porridge.
And they absolutely stick together. The black guys, they all dine together, and the Muslims stick together. It's an absolute divide. You just don't get any mixing. They're quite chatty if you bump into them, but and if you're on a course with them, then they chat. But any recreation, the meals, it's absolutely divided.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, but that's the case outside of prison as well.
What was the main methods of passing time?
I was sort of quite lucky. I found out sort of quite quickly that if you're retired, you can do pretty much what you want, and you still get your money, so you can still buy your tea and everything. For a short while, I worked in the library. I was sacked from that because I tried to burgle it once, and I was after the chessboard. And but I got a clipboard, and while I was at the library, one of my duties would be photocopying of things. So that gave me sort of access to the photocopying room. And after that, you're never questioned. Nobody said you were still in the library. So, and in fact, if you walk around with a clipboard, you can do a lot of things. Nobody questions. You've got a clipboard. So what do you do? Well, I'm go see. Oh, it's fine. I've got a clipboard. It's fine. Also, a lot of the burglary of the greenhouses was done at midnight, you know. But I would go along with my clipboard and get a handful of tomatoes or a couple of eggs out of chickens and things like that. My only job that I took on, I didn't have to work, but I took on the job of looking after the chickens. So I had fresh eggs, which is. Now there are companies like Sodexo and these massive companies that supply goods to prisons, and the stuff they supply is out of date. You order some oranges and they come there with that sort of mould on them, you know, and that's when you hear, and they call those criminals. That's what you'll hear all the time, and they call those criminals. Like I say, they did have a pretty good go at deporting me. I can show you lots of Home Office chat about how easy it will be for my wife, who speaks Belgian, and that's the language spoken in Belgium. She speaks. I bit of Home. I haven't really time to dig it out. It's on there.
There's no such language.
That's the point.
She speaks Belgian, and also there'd be no problem. They said that my children were fluent French speakers, which they're not. My children were described as nationality unknown. I was described as nationality unknown, and yeah, I'm a Belgian speaker. So, and it would be no problem at all. Now, I don't know if you know, but the education system in France and Belgium, if you're not in it at the start, you can't be in it. It's a continuity thing with the baccalaureate, and you'd have to go to an international school or something like that. But you can't just get into a Belgian school if you're English. You know, that would be sort of stupid. But there's all this Home Office. There would be no problem for the family to be living in Belgium. But they tell a lot of lies in order to get that paperwork off their desk and onto somebody else's. And I saying that one of the reasons that it would be discounted for her appeal was that there's no evidence that she has any relationship with her children. No evidence, because she has not provided. She has not provided any evidence of an ongoing relationship with her children. Now, my wife didn't work in my business at all. She's just an old-fashioned housewife, if you like. She does have a degree in clinical psychology, but she's never put that to use. She just brought up the children, drove them to school every day. But when they say there's no evidence, she hasn't produced any evidence. She's in prison. When you're in prison, you can't get hold of, you don't have access to your filing cabinets that God knows where they are now. And no evidence that she'd lived continuously in the country for more than 5 years. But we've been prosecuted for operating a business for more than 8 years. So they just lie and lie and lie. And there's an awful lot of, it's 8%. And whoever you ask that knows anything about it, say, yeah, it's about 8%. People that are in prison actually shouldn't be in there. And a lot of people that might deserve the sentence or deserve to be punished. We used to say, there was an accountant, and he said, it's going to be difficult for me to work now, virtually impossible, unless I'm in some sort of criminal enterprise. He said, they could have just made me work for them. Now, if they did that, right, so you do a crime. It might be violent crime, it might be drugs or whatever. Don't send them to prison, make them work. Give them a job. Or take all their wages, but let them stay at home, keep the girlfriend, keep their car payments up, but they've got to work for you now until they've paid off their debt to society. That would be a good idea, because it completely destroys the guy's possibility of having any kind of life afterwards, even a short prison term. Short prison terms are the worst. They completely screw somebody's life up, far out of proportion with what he's probably done.
Sorry, just any more questions?
Yeah.
I wanted just to ask this sort of big picture of the when you got out, what happened? What interactions do you have?
I was very lucky.
You came out of the tag.
I was very, very lucky. No. I was supposed to be released on the 8th of August. And when you're about to be released, you have to get a medical discharge. You go along and get that, because you're being released, and that's all the paperwork's done for that. They called me in at 4 o'clock the day before I was to be released, and they said, "Oh, terribly sorry, there's been a terrible mistake. 2 ladies from POCA, Proceeds of Crime team, have come. They're all upset because your POCA, Proceeds of Crime, hasn't been sorted out yet. You can't be released on tag." I said, "My POCA has been sorted out. There's a solicitor's undertaking to give the proceeds of a house that was left to me while I was in prison well, no, sorry, it's proceeds of crime, they say." So I didn't get released, and I had to do an extra 4 months. So I immediately got on the Proceeds of Crime and said, "Look, this, as you know, it's been solved. You have solicitors undertaking to give you the free proceeds from the sale of that house." And I got a letter back, because I phoned them a couple of times just to check. Got a letter back. It's entirely a matter for the prison authority, and this department has no input or influence on the matter whatsoever. And then, after the full stop, there was a 0, just to make it clear. There was nothing to do with them at all, and it was the prison. So, the prison lied to me. I tried to sort of get this organised from prison, and I made a big mistake of mentioning that I know Michael Gove.
We've all done that.
Well, I used to make his suits, and he's a nice chap. It wasn't a good idea, because the prisons hate him, because when he was justice, he did sort them out a little bit. The prison warden, I had the last letter from a house sale that had to be sold. I'm trying to sell a house in prison. If I don't sell it, I get an extra year in prison, because the judge had been told that the house was acquired through criminal activity. It was left to me when I was in prison. my father's a Welsh coal miner. He saved up and bought his house. When my mother died, it came to me. So there wasn't any criminal, it wasn't the proceeds of crime. But the judge wasn't told that. The judge told that it was one of my recoverable assets acquired through 8 years of a criminal lifestyle. Yeah. When the bailiffs came, when I went bankrupt, to look at what I'd got, I've never had a car that's been worth taking. I buy a second-hand Merc every 5 years, running it around by another old machines like this. So that's why I could hang on to the factory and keep the factory going, even though I went bust one time, well, twice actually. When you go bankrupt, you then don't owe any previous money to anybody at all. That's the whole point about going bankrupt. So they should really have only gone back on my records 2 years. And they're supposed to show up at the bankruptcy. They get the chance to show up. If they don't, they forfeit that right. But they went back 8 years. But they didn't mention that I'd gone bankrupt. See, when they construct the case, and you find out that if you've pleaded guilty, and they can lie and lie and lie and lie, and you get a stupid judge that doesn't say, well, hey, this is impossible, something funny here, mate. So it just all goes through. And then you find out that when something's gone through and you've pleaded guilty, it can't then be changed. You can't alter it. So that figure of £500,000 technically has to lower. Yeah. But they're not getting it. So
One more question? Yes, Eugenia.
I'm a bit worried about something. I understand that you struggle to tomatoes.
struggle to what?
Worry about stolen tomatoes?
No, I'm not worried about that. I've done the same. Did you say you stole a book? That gets me very worried.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
why?
no, chess set.
A chest.
And I also stole a blues CD from the library too. Yeah, I've got it at home and it says library on it.
Outrageous.
So the prison turned you into more of a criminal.
Yeah, like I say, I mean, I now know where I can buy a gun. I didn't know that before I went to prison, but I could absolutely go somewhere and buy a gun tonight. They're not that expensive. And I'm a qualified plumber. I did a very long time ago, when I was building something. I went to a skill centre and learnt how to lay bricks because I got fed up of bricklayers telling me things and I thought, no, I'm sure it wouldn't. So I qualified as a bricklayer to City and Guilds. I didn't mention that when I decided to get my hand in again because I was getting a little bit bored and do the bricklaying course. I went there. I didn't say, oh, I already know how to do this. I thought I'd just go do all these things. And of course, everything I did was absolutely fine. And this guy come down and criticise it. He felt he had to make some comment about it. And I said to him, oh, you want me to make a curve wall? Yeah, lovely, I'll do that. I said, I use it. He said, use the red bricks. I said, they're clay bricks. He said, they're all bricks are clay. I said, no, there's clay bricks and there's flattens. And I realised he didn't know anything about bricklaying. I mean, curved wall, I don't think anybody's done it. You can imagine with, if you want to do an arc, you could get a piece of wire or something and nail it there and do an arc. What you can't do is use a piece of string that builders use for a line because it's stretchy, it's elastic. So if you try to do an arc with a tolerance of just a couple of millimetres at the most, you're going to be all over the place like this. And I had this guy, and the other guys were watching him do an arc with elastic string like that. So the guy that was running the bricklaying course didn't know anything about bricklaying. The guy that's running the multi-skills thing allowed me to go through and not do it and awarded me with this certificate. See, they get paid for every prisoner that passes the thing. But anyway, there's loads of young guys got a qualification in horticulture now, so let's drink to them, I suppose.
Thank you very much, David.